I sold everything to save my wife's life. Then she left me. But karma had other plans. I'm William, and I'm 53 years old now. Life has taught me that memories never truly fade. They just grow quieter, settling into the corners of your mind like dust on forgotten photographs. Some nights, I still wake to the phantom sound of that hospital monitor beeping in the dark, steady as a metronome marking the rhythm of my fear. Other times, I catch the faint scent of jasmine carried on the wind, and it pulls me back to her, to Clara, and to the years that simultaneously made and unmade me. When you're young, love feels invincible, doesn't it? You build your entire existence around someone's smile, their laughter, the small habits that seem as eternal as the stars themselves. Clara used to hum when she cooked. Sometimes it was a melody from an old record, sometimes just a tune she invented on the spot. I used to tease her, saying she carried music inside her very soul, that even silence would pause just to listen when she was near. We met in a library of all places. Two strangers reaching for the same worn poetry book on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. Her hand brushed mine and she laughed. Not the polite chuckle strangers exchange, but something genuine and warm. That laugh undid me completely. It wasn't loud or theatrical, just authentically alive. The kind of laugh that told you she'd seen pain in her life, but refused to let it define her story. Guess we have the same taste, she'd said, those green eyes sparkling with mischief. Or fate has a sense of humor. I'd replied, and that was the beginning of everything. We married young, perhaps too young by conventional standards, but we didn't care about convention. Our world was small but felt complete. A modest two-bedroom house with creaky floors, a little garden where Clara grew tomatoes and herbs, and dreams that didn't demand mansions or luxury cars. We had each other, and that simple truth was enough. Until the day it suddenly wasn't. It began so quietly you could almost miss it. A persistent cough that lingered week after week, a shortness of breath she dismissed as exhaustion from work. "I'm just tired, Will," she'd say, waving away my concern with a tired smile. But I could see something changing. The light in her eyes was dimming, like a candle slowly running out of wax. She tried to hide it from me, and God help me. I let her, maybe because I was terrified of what I'd discover if I looked too closely at the truth. The night she collapsed is seared into my memory with perfect, horrifying clarity. One moment she was standing by the kitchen sink, humming softly as she washed dinner dishes. The next moment, her body went completely limp. The ceramic mug she'd been holding shattered against the tile floor, coffee spreading across the white tiles like dark blood. I remember shouting her name, my voice cracking and breaking against the walls of our small kitchen. I remember the way her hand twitched weakly in mine as I cradled her head, begging her to stay awake, to stay with me, to not leave me alone in this world. I remember the metallic taste of fear in my mouth as I fumbled for my phone to call 911, my hand shaking so badly I could barely dial. The ambulance ride was a blur of flashing lights and urgent voices. At the hospital, time became strange and elastic. Minutes felt like hours, hours condensed into moments. Doctors and nurses rushed past in white coats, their faces serious, their voices hushed. They spoke in a language I barely understood, heavy with clinical terminology. Rare congenital heart condition, progressive deterioration, requires urgent surgical intervention, significant financial cost. I nodded mechanically, pretending I understood their medical jargon, but all I truly heard beneath their professional explanations was a terrifying truth. She's dying. Money became a cruel, harsh word overnight. The doctor spoke in numbers. Numbers so astronomically large they didn't even feel real, just abstract concepts that couldn't possibly apply to my life. Our insurance, which we paid faithfully every month, barely scratched the surface of what was needed. I remember walking out into the hospital parking lot at 3 a.m, leaning against my old Honda, and having the sudden, crushing realization that everything I own in this world could fit into one desperate, impossible choice. Save her life or lose her forever. I made my decision in that parking lot, under flickering fluorescent lights and a moonless sky. I sold it all, everything. The house we'd saved years to buy, filled with memories of lazy Sunday mornings and whispered conversations in the dark. The car my father had helped me buy when I graduated college. My tools, The ones I collected piece by piece over a decade of carpentry work. Even the antique pocket watch my father had left me when he passed, the only tangible piece of him I had left in this world. People said I was foolish when word got around our small town. Some called it devotion. Others whispered it was madness, that I was throwing my life away. My older brother practically screamed at me over the phone. "You can't save someone by destroying yourself, William." But he was wrong. Love isn't measured in logic or careful calculation. It's the quiet, bone-deep conviction that you'd rather break into 1,000 pieces than watch the person you love disappear from existence. It's knowing that you could never forgive yourself for choosing differently, even if choosing this way costs you everything. I watched our life dismantle piece by piece over those frantic weeks. Furniture sold to strangers who didn't know that the dining table held 10 years of dinners and conversations. Pictures taken down from walls, leaving pale rectangles where they'd hung. Memories boxed up and traded upon shops for cash that would feed the hungry beast of medical bills. I moved through those days like a ghost, surviving on nothing but adrenaline, black coffee, and a desperate fuel of hope. The surgery took 6.5 hours. I sat in that waiting room from 7 in the morning until past 2 in the afternoon, staring at the same water stain on the ceiling tile until my vision blurred and my eyes ached. I counted the speckles in the linoleum floor. I memorized the faces of other people waiting, all of us trapped in our private hells of hope and fear. I prayed to a God I wasn't sure I believed in anymore, making bargains I had no power to keep. When the surgeon finally emerged through those double doors, still in his scrubs with exhaustion etched into every line of his face, his expression didn't immediately give me an answer. For one eternal, horrible moment, I thought I'd lost her. Then he nodded just once, the smallest dip of his chin, and I collapsed into a waiting room chair, my entire body shaken with relief, so intense it felt like I was breaking apart. She lived. Those first days after the operation were the purest, most intense form of joy I've ever experienced in my life. Seeing her open her eyes, weak but alive, was like witnessing sunrise after years trapped in absolute darkness. She was pale and fragile, with tubes running from her arms and monitors beeping softly. But she was there. She was still in this world. She smiled at me through the oxygen tubes and whispered in a voice barely audible, "You didn't give up on me." I took her hand, careful before, and told her the simplest truth I knew. I never could, not in a million years. But life after survival isn't as simple or beautiful as the movies would have you believe. Clara came home frail, her skin pale as old linen, her movements careful and uncertain. I carried her up the stairs to our temporary apartment because she couldn't manage them herself yet. I cooked meals, cleaned obsessively, worked every odd job I could find, landscaping, construction, late-night warehouse shifts, to pay the debts that still followed us like persistent shadows. We'd moved into a small rented apartment above a bakery, on the edge of town. It smelled perpetually of fresh bread and sugar, and for a while, that sweet scent became an unexpected comfort, a small, daily reminder that sweetness and beauty still exist in the world. I'd wake at dawn to the sound of the bakers downstairs starting their ovens, hear Clara breathing softly beside me, and allow myself to believe that we've been given a precious second chance. But second chances, I learned the hard way, often come accompanied by ghosts you never expected. Clara changed. Maybe it was a trauma of almost dying, maybe the crushing weight of guilt, maybe something deeper that the surgery had altered. I saw in the way she stared out the window for hours, as if waiting for something or someone I couldn't see. She stopped humming completely. That music that used to fill our mornings and evenings vanished entirely, leaving behind a silence that pressed down on both of us like a physical weight. At first, I told myself it was just part recovery, that she needed time to find herself again. I gently remind her little things we used to love. The park where we'd feed the ducks, the songs she used to sing, the dreams we'd shared. She'd smile faintly in response, but the smile never reached her eyes. The light I'd fought so hard to save seemed to be fading anyway, despite everything. One cold evening in November, I came home from a double shift to find her sitting alone in complete darkness. When I turned on the light, blinking against the sudden brightness, she said something that stopped my heart. "You should have let me go, William." The words hit me with more force than any physical blow ever could. Clara, I said quietly, carefully, sitting down beside her, "You don't mean that." But she did. I could see it in her trembling hands, in the tears she tried desperately to hide, in the way she couldn't meet my eyes. "Every single time I look at you," she whispered, her voice breaking, "I see everything you lost because of me. I see the house we bought together, the life you had, the future you sacrificed. I feel it hanging over me like a debt I can never, ever repay. I'm drowning in it, Will." I tried to tell her that none of those things mattered, that material possessions were meaningless compared to her life, that she was my home regardless of where we lived. But she shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "You deserve peace, William. You deserve to rebuild your life. And I can't give that to you. I can't even give it to myself." A week later, I came home to find an envelope on our small kitchen table. Her wedding ring lay beside it, the gold band catching the afternoon light. Inside were divorce papers, already signed in her careful handwriting. I didn't cry right away. I think part of me had sensed this coming, had felt her pulling away for months. I just sat there staring at those papers until the words blurred together, my vision swimming. There were no angry accusations, no dramatic confrontations. Just a quiet, devastating ending to something I believed would last forever. She left while I was at work the next day. When I came home that evening, the apartment felt hollow and wrong. Her clothes were gone from the closet, her toothbrush missing from the bathroom, her scent already beginning to fade from the sheets. She'd taken almost nothing else, just her clothes and a few books. Everything else she'd left behind, like she was trying to erase herself from my life as gently as possible. The following months passed in a fog of numbness and routine. I worked until my hands bled and my back ached, ate only when my body demanded it, slept when exhaustion forced me into unconsciousness. People at work said I'd done something noble, something heroic, that I should be proud. But pride doesn't fill an empty bed at night or quiet the echo of a love that used to breathe beside you in the darkness. I moved mechanically through my days. Wake up, work, come home to silence. Repeat. The apartment above the bakery became a prison of memories. Sometimes I'd catch myself setting the table for two before remembering. Sometimes I'd turn to tell Clara something funny that happened, only to find empty air where she used to be. Sometimes, late at night, when sleep refused to come, I'd sit by the window watching the empty street below and have entire conversations with her in my head. I'd tell her I hoped she'd found peace somewhere, that I forgave her for leaving, that maybe someday I'd even forgive myself for failing to make her happy. But the truth was simpler and darker. I felt hollow, emptied out, like someone had scooped out everything vital and left just a shell of who I used to be. I'd saved her life, sacrificed everything I owned to keep her heart beating, and in doing so, I'd somehow lost my own life anyway. The irony wasn't lost on me. It's strange and mysterious how life has a way of circling back when you least expect it, when you've given up hoping for anything good. I was sitting on a park bench one gray afternoon in March, eating a sandwich and watching pigeons fight over breadcrumbs, when I received an unexpected piece of mail. The envelope was cream-colored and formal, with my name written in elegant script. Inside was a letter from a lawyer I'd never met, working for a firm I'd never heard of. He said I'd been named in the will of a man called Henry Alden. It took me several long minutes to place the name. Then, slowly, the memory surfaced. An old carpenter I'd helped years ago, before Clara got sick, before everything fell apart. A violent storm had torn through our town one summer, and his workshop roof had completely caved in. Everyone had told him the building wasn't worth saving, that he should just tear it down and move on. But I'd gone there anyway. Spent 3 long days in the heat fixing that roof with him, replacing beams, patching holes. We'd talk while we worked, about wood grain and joinery, about faith and purpose, about how life gives us meaning to the things we choose to mend rather than abandon. He'd told me once, wiping sweat from his weathered face, "Kindness is the only investment that never loses its value, son. You remember that." I hadn't seen him since that summer. I didn't know he'd been keeping track of me. I didn't know he'd passed away. The letter explained that Henry had left me his property, his home, and the workshop, everything. I genuinely thought it was a mistake, some clerical error. But when I drove out to the address the lawyer provided, keys trembling in my hand, I found it was real. A small craftsman house on a hill, surrounded by towering pines and the rich smell of cedar. Inside, his tools were neatly arranged on the walls, with shavings still scattered on the floor, like he'd just stepped out for lunch. For the first time in years, maybe since Clara left, I felt something other than numbness. Not quite happiness, but stillness. The peaceful kind of stillness that comes after a storm finally passes. I moved in with nothing but a duffel bag of clothes and a handful of painful memories. The house was simple but solid, with good bones and a craftsmanship you rarely see anymore. I spent the first few weeks just cleaning, organizing, learning the space. Then I started taking on small, repair jobs for neighbors. It began modestly. A broken chair for the elderly woman down the hill, a cracked table for the young couple next door. Word spread slowly in that small community. People paid me with fresh bread, homegrown vegetables, sometimes just heartfelt thanks. I didn't care about money anymore. Working with my hands again, shaping wood and solving problems, made me feel genuinely alive for first time in forever. In the evenings, I'd light an oil lamp and sit on the porch, listening to the forest breathe around me. The air smelled of pine sap and rich earth, and sometimes if I closed my eyes and let myself drift, I could almost believe the world had forgiven me for whatever failures had led me here. Months passed. I stopped counting days or marking calendars. The constant ache inside me didn't vanish. I don't think that kind of pain ever completely disappears, but it softened gradually, like a stone worn smooth by water. I started sleeping through the night, without nightmares. I found myself laughing at jokes the mail carrier told. A little boy who lived nearby started calling me Mr. William the Wood Wizard, and his innocent laughter reminded me so much of how Clara used to laugh that it hurt and healed simultaneously. I was learning, slowly and painfully, that healing doesn't mean forgetting. It means finding a way to carry your scars without letting them define every step you take. Then one spring morning, when the first pale buds were beginning to bloom on the trees, and the air smelled of renewal, I heard unexpected footsteps on the gravel path outside my workshop. I glanced up from the rocking chair I was sanding, assuming it was a neighbor or a potential customer. A woman's silhouette appeared at the gate, backlit by morning sun. I thought it was just another visitor, until she stepped fully into the light, and I saw her face. Clara. For a long, suspended moment, neither of us spoke. Time seemed to freeze. The years had changed her in subtle ways. Her hair was shorter now, cut to her shoulders, and there were fine lines around her eyes that hadn't been there before. Her posture was different, more uncertain. But the familiarity crashed over me like a wave. "Hi, Will," she said softly, her voice exactly as I remembered it. I didn't know what to say. My hands trembled, sawdust still clinging to my fingers. My throat felt impossibly tight. "Clara," I finally managed, my voice rough with surprise and a dozen other emotions. It's been a long time." She nodded slowly, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "It has. 3 years for months." The specificity of that told me she'd been counting too. We stood there in awkward silence as the wind stirred the pine trees, carrying the scent of spring. She looked past me at the workshop, at the house that had somehow become my refuge. "I heard about this place," she said quietly. "Someone from town mentioned you'd moved here, that you were doing woodworking again. I wanted to see it for myself, to see if you were okay." I gestured toward the house, my heart hammering. "Would you like to come inside?" She hesitated, uncertainty flickering across her face, then nodded and stepped forward. Her shoes crunched on the gravel path. I'd laid myself, stone by careful stone. Inside, she moved slowly around the workshop, running her fingers gently over the smooth surface of a table I'd been crafting. "You always were gifted with your hands," she said, a sad smile touching her lips. "I've forgotten how beautiful your work is." "It keeps me sane," I replied honestly. "Gives me purpose." She looked around at the tools, the wood, the order I created here, then turned back to me. "You look different, William. Peaceful somehow." "I had to learn how to be," I said quietly, leaning against a workbench. "After you left, I didn't know who I was anymore. I thought everything worth living for had walked out that door with you. But here, with the wood, the quiet, the smell of sawdust and pine, I slowly started to hear myself again. Not the man who'd lost everything, just a man who still existed underneath all that pain. She smiled, genuinely this time, and for a fleeting moment I saw the woman I'd fallen in love with in that library. The warmth, the gentleness, the life behind those green eyes. But there was something else there now, too. Acceptance, and a hard-won wisdom that only comes from suffering. "Are you happy, William?" she asked, the question hanging in the air between us. I thought about the nights alone in this house, about the laughter of the little boy who called me his wood wizard, about the profound satisfaction of taking something broken and making it whole again. Happiness wasn't what I had. It was something deeper and more sustainable. "I'm at peace," I said finally, "and I think that's better than happy." She nodded slowly, understanding in her eyes. "Then I'm glad. Truly." She reached into her bag with trembling hands and pulled out a small velvet box. "I found this a few months ago while sorting through my things," she said softly. Inside was the ring I'd given her on our wedding day. It looked smaller now, more fragile, like something from another lifetime. "I kept it," she whispered. "Even after I left, even when I told myself I should sell it or throw it away, I couldn't let it go. It reminded me that once, someone loved me completely." I looked at her, feeling the weight of all our years together and a part pressing down on my chest. "You're still loved, Clara, just differently now." A single tear slid down her cheek. "I don't deserve that kind of grace." "Maybe not," I said gently, honestly, but love was never about deserving. It's about remembering what it meant, what it taught us, who it helped us become. We made tea and talked for hours. She told me about her life since leaving, how she'd moved to a city 2 states away, found work in a nonprofit, went to therapy twice a week, how she dated someone briefly but couldn't make it work because she was still carrying too much guilt, how she'd finally learned that her leaving hadn't freed me at all, that she'd caused a different kind of pain while trying to end her own. "I thought I was doing a noble thing," she said, staring into her cup. "I convinced myself that leaving was the only way to give you your life back. But it wasn't noble. It was cowardice dressed up as sacrifice." I didn't argue with her. Sometimes people need to confess their regrets out loud. "You know what I finally understood?" she continued. "That love isn't about keeping score or paying debts. It's about being brave enough to stay when everything hurts." And I wasn't brave enough. You were, but I wasn't. We were both doing our best with impossible circumstances. I said, "You can't blame yourself for breaking under that kind of pressure." "But you didn't break," she said. "You lost everything and somehow became more whole." I shook my head. "I did break, Clara. Completely. It took me 2 years just to feel human again. This piece you see? I had to fight for every piece of it. Some days I still do." We sat there as the afternoon light faded, the sun painting the sky in shades of gold and violet through the workshop windows. The world felt suspended, holding its breath just for us. "Do you think you could ever forgive me?" she asked quietly. "I already have," I said truthfully. "I forgave you the day you left. I understood why you had to go." She wiped her eyes. "You always did see the best in people." "Not always," I said with a slight smile. "Just in you." When the shadows grew long, she finally stood to leave. "I should go," she said, though I could hear the reluctance in her voice. I wanted to ask her to stay, to have dinner, to tell me more about her life now. But something inside me understood that this wasn't about rekindling what we'd lost. This was about finding closure, about each of us seeing that the other had survived. "Take care of yourself, Clara," I said, walking her to the door. She paused on the threshold, her hand on the frame. "Do you ever think about what could have been? If things had gone differently?" I smiled faintly, honestly. "Every day. But I also think about what was the good parts, the love we shared, the way you made me laugh. And that's enough. It has to be." She nodded, fresh tears shining in her eyes. "You're a better person than I am." "No," I said, "just a person who's learned to let go." She stepped out into the cool evening air, and I watched her walk down the path toward where she'd parked her car beyond the trees. She turned once, raising her hand in a small wave. I waved back, and then she was gone, disappearing around the bend. I didn't follow. I didn't need to. When the sound of her footsteps finally faded completely, I turned back to my workshop. The half-finished rocking chair waited for me, its curved arms smooth under my calloused hands. I picked up my tools and began to work again, each stroke steady and deliberate, falling into the familiar rhythm, though it seemed to breathe beneath my fingers, alive, forgiving, honest. As I worked, I thought about everything life had taught me. That love isn't always a fairy tale with a happy ending. Sometimes it's sacrifice and loss, and watching someone walk away, while wishing them peace instead of begging them to stay. Sometimes it's finding meaning in what remains after everything else is burned away. I'd sold everything once to save Clara's life. Every possession, every security, every piece of the future I'd imagined. I'd lost her anyway. But in the ashes of that devastating loss, I found something no amount of money could ever buy: clarity. The deep understanding that love's purpose isn't necessarily to last forever. Its purpose is to transform us, to teach us how deep we can dig, how much we can give, how strong we can become when everything is stripped away. When I look back now from the perspective of 53 years, I don't feel bitterness or resentment. I feel something closer to gratitude. For the laughter we shared in that small house with the creaky floors. For the pain that forced me to grow in ways I never would have otherwise. For the silence that finally taught me to listen to my own voice again. Henry Alden had told me that kindness is the only investment that never loses its value. He was right. That single act of helping him repair his workshop had come back to save me when I needed saving most. Not with money or possessions, but with space and time and the tools to rebuild myself. That's what people don't understand about karma. It's not about cosmic revenge or punishment. It's about the quiet, patient way that goodness circles back. Sometimes it takes years. Sometimes it arrives when you've given up hoping. But it comes. At 53, I finally understand what people mean when they say that love never really dies. It doesn't disappear or evaporate. It just changes form, transforms into something else. It becomes memory, both sweet and painful. It becomes inner strength you didn't know you possessed. It becomes a capacity for forgiveness, for grace, for letting go. It becomes a quiet companion that sits beside you in the workshop when the world has gone still and you're alone with your thoughts and your tools. Sometimes, when the moon is full and the night air is gentle, I imagine Clara walking somewhere far away under the same sky. Maybe she's finally smiling again. Maybe she's found her own version of peace in that distant city. Maybe she's even humming again, filling her space with the music I remember. I like to think she has. And if fate ever brings her back to my door, I'll welcome her. Not as a woman I lost, not as a wife who left, but as a crucial chapter in my story that taught me how to end something with grace and how to begin again from nothing. Because in the end, it wasn't karma that brought some cosmic justice to my suffering, and it wasn't the pain itself that taught me strength. It was love, stripped of all illusion, humbled by devastating loss, and quietly reborn in silence and sawdust and the patient work of healing. I sold everything I owned to save her life. But what I didn't realize back then in that hospital parking lot, when I made my desperate choice, was that in losing her I was also saving something else. I was saving the part of myself that still believes in grace, in second chances, in the quiet mercy of letting go. And maybe that's the real gift. Not the house Henry left me, not even the peace I found in this workshop. The real gift is knowing that I'm capable of that kind of love, the kind that gives everything and asks for nothing back, the kind that survives even when the person you love can't stay. That knowledge lives in me now, permanent as a scar, precious as a prayer. And on the quiet days when I'm alone with my work and my memories, I touch it gently, the way you touch something holy, and I remember, I am not what I lost. I am what remains, and what remains is enough. Please like, comment, and share. If this is your first time watching my video, don't forget to subscribe to my channel, so you'll be notified whenever I post a new story.